Welcome to Five Star Conversations, where we dive deep into the journeys of hospitality's most influential leaders. And today I have the pleasure of speaking with Matt Tripolone. Hi, Matt. Welcome.
Brendon, how are you?
Good, thank you. I'll start off with your bio. So obviously people have a background, and we post that on Spotify and on YouTube as well, so people will have that. And then what we'll do is we'll get into some questions, so we'll get to know you a little bit better. So Matt's the managing director for Australia and the Pacific at IHG, one of the world's leading hotel companies. He's based in Sydney, Australia, although he travels a lot since 2021. He leads the company's strategic growth, performance, and operations in Australia and Pacific region. Matt was previously based in Dubai as Vice President of Development for IHG's Middle East and African region since 2018. There, he built and led a team that signed 17,000 keys, delivering unparalleled growth and signings for the group, including the first Kimpton in MEA and the world's largest Crown Plaza and Voco hotels in the world. Prior to that, Matt headed development for IHG in Australia and Japan, where he was responsible for IHG's growth and doubled the annual signings, including iconic properties such as the Intercontinental Perth, the Crown Plaza Christchurch, Crown Plaza Sydney Darling Harbour, and the Intercontinental Hayman Island, as well as the renewal of several strategic portfolio properties in the group. Matt joined IHG in 2014 from Accor, where he held the role of General Manager Development Pacific since 2008. Prior to that, Matt has worked for a number of leading companies specializing in development, planning, and acquisition, including Scania Developments and Urbis. And Matt holds a Bachelor of Arts and a Master's in Urban Planning and Development from the University of Sydney. Welcome again, Matt.
Thanks, Brendon. Nice to be here. Thank you.
Matt, the first question I always like to ask is, did you choose hospitality or did it choose you?
Great question. I've thought about it quite a bit lately, actually. And to be honest, I think it chose me. Because as you can see, you just read out my resume, which I hate hearing my resume, but you read it out because technically they're the facts.
Yep.
And from my education, you can probably hear that I wasn't formally educated in the hospitality sector. I was actually, I did a Bachelor of Arts because I loved humanities and literature and all those sorts of things. So I have a broad range of interests. And then I did a degree in town planning and urban development because I had a deep interest in real estate. Interestingly, there was hospitality always there from the very beginning. And you and I have spoken off air around that hospitality is often seen as a transitory sector. Like it's a job you do whilst you're doing something else, studying something else to eventually get somewhere else. And I suppose to a certain extent, I did that too. I was guilty of that myself. At university, I worked for an agency, and this agency did events for the stars, events for the very very wealthy and affluent, members of Sydney society and Australian society. But I got to do some pretty amazing events. I did New Year's Eve 2000 with Lachlan Murdoch and Sarah O'Hare. I did the wedding as well. Actually, I did parties all around Sydney and got to see some pretty amazing places and see some pretty amazing people. And I worked with some pretty amazing people. And that was probably the thing that really got me and always had me to a certain extent, that the people I encountered, whilst it was a temporary job for me at the time because I was being educated, I worked with people who just loved what they did. They loved serving people. They loved providing hospitality to people. And I never forgot that. So I went off into my journey of real estate, town planning, but then migrated into real estate and property development. But hospitality was always in the back of my mind as something that I knew attracted really beautiful people. And, you're smiling right now. You'd put smile on people's faces. You don't forget that sort of stuff. So eventually, one of the companies I was working for before I entered the traditional hotel sector, we worked on some hotel projects. So I was providing development and town planning advice to some hospitality hotel projects.
Yeah.
And that rekindled my love for the sector. And I realized, oh, wow, that's right. I did love that. That was an amazing experience. And as things played out, that led to a number of things which eventuated in me securing a job at Accor many, many years ago now, 2008, so just before the global financial crisis at the time. And I worked for Accor in the development team. And at the time, Accor were developing hotels themselves. They were real estate developers through a fund that they had established with some other Australian developers. So I was able to combine my love of real estate and hotel development, or development, sorry, with the hospitality sector,
Mm.
which I loved. And then my journey began. So I think it'd be fair to say I dabbled in the industry. It sort of grabbed me. I let it pass for a while, but then it pulled me back.
We find that I had a stint, so to speak, out of the industry where it wasn't my core focus for a couple of years, but you're never too far away from the industry, I think, at the end of the day.
Yeah, I have to agree.
Is there an experience or a memory from your early part of your career that sort of cemented that love? It sounds like the work that you're doing, obviously, for the agency was amazing. What about once you started with Accor? Was there something you remember and it's like, yes, I found the place where I want to be, or
Yeah, look, I mean, I've got lots of reminders of why I've done this, actually, and so I've never had a single regret about the change that I've made. And my time at Accor was wonderful. I had wonderful leaders and mentors there. At the time, Accor was the big engine here. They still are, actually, but they were going through an amazing growth, which was predominantly driven by the local leadership team, which was largely Australians who were looking after the growth for Accor for the Asia Pacific region. And I worked with the likes of Michael Eisenberg, a gentleman called Kim Mooney, who's sadly passed, but a wonderful. I learned so much of him. He sat in the office opposite me whilst he was in Sydney. Gaurav Bhushan, who was the Chief Development Officer for Accor for many, many years, and still a very good friend of mine is Lindsay Lisa, who again wonderful mentor of mine as well, as long as Simon McGrath. So I had a great team around me when I joined Accor, who I learnt many, many, many things off. But I suppose what really solidified it for me was I joined, and one of the first engagements I had to do was go down to a place called Mildura on the border, Victoria, South Australia, New South Wales. And I was working on franchise projects for Accor at the time, and I was able to meet some grassroots hoteliers based out of Mildura who had a chain of hotels around regional Victoria and South Australia. And I remember going down, and to be fair, I didn't know a lot about what I was doing, to be honest, other than I love hotels. I know how you build them, but as to what we give you, I'm learning on the way. But I went down and had this wonderful experience with two gentlemen who owned the hotel who I'd never met before. And we had a wonderful dinner. And the following morning, they got me up at 7 a.m. in the morning for a hotel tour, and then we did the deal, and that was amazing. So I got to meet some wonderful people who made me feel welcome, even though it was the first time I met them. We shared an amazing meal together, became very, very, very close in a short amount of time. Did a deal because it was as much about relationships as the business construct, and then that led to multiple further deals with the group. And my journey was away. So that was amazing experience to see that those people were just wonderful people. And also, it's really amazing when you work for a group in, let's call it business development, real estate development for hotel companies, to see the projects you work on when they open, and generally successful projects. It's a wonderful feeling. So that solidified me. It's not an embarrassing story, but it's a really memorable story around why I did this.
no, I like that.
Yes.
And I can get that. Obviously, you sign a deal, and then 4 or 5 years later, it comes to fruition. The property opens and it's beautiful. Probably not quite as life changing as having a child, but similar
I'm
experience, right? Because you were part of that.
Yeah, Brendon, I'm still part of it. In fact, I was just down in Hobart actually yesterday, would you believe? And one of the early projects that I worked on here at IHG when I came across was a Crown Plaza project down in Hobart, which we worked on and signed the contract in 2015. And local family down there, experienced publicans and entrepreneurs down in Hobart and real estate owners. And this was their first big box hotel. And I worked with a dear friend of mine, Kate Harper, on that project, and we signed a long-term management contract. It faced all sorts of challenges through construction, builder challenges. They when they were excavating, they came across some artifacts, which then stopped the project for 9 months, and to deal with that cost significant money to rectify. Then they had a flood because they hit an underground river, all sorts of challenges. And then I went overseas to Dubai, so sort of left the project. And I knew that the construction issues continued. And then they had COVID and they were trying to complete the project during COVID. So they opened at the back end of COVID. Anyway, long story short, I was having lunch with them yesterday and relaying these stories. We were sort of, well, we weren't laughing about it because it's very serious for these owners. It's really expensive projects to deliver. But I suppose what I said was most proud was when you walk through these hotels, the living organisms, the trading businesses with guests staying there and jobs being created for wonderful people. And it's a proud moment to see it as an idea, see it as a contract, see it as a development construction project, and then seeing it as the building and the business that it becomes. I'm very lucky in what I do.
Yeah, that's yeah, I can see that. A bit like, I suppose, opening a hotel as a general manager.
Mm.
You've got that pride that you've been involved in creating something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, truly special.
Yeah, definitely. Matt, what's one of the best pieces of advice you've ever been given in your career? Well, actually, it doesn't have to be a career, because to be honest, a lot of my guests will say it was something that my father said to me or my grandfather said to me that really resonated and has held me in good stead throughout my career. But often it could be someone when you started your career as well.
Oh, look, I've got a few of those, to be honest. And picking one is challenging. I've had great advice in my personal and professional life, but if as it relates to professional life, I think it's impossible to get to any level of affluence or mastery, let's call it, unless you truly love what you do. And so that's the first piece of advice: to truly be happy, and the byproduct of that is success. Generally, whatever you deem as success, you've got to have passion and enjoyment in it. And sometimes you lose that passion and enjoyment because of the stress or the pressures that you put on yourself, and they might be influenced by what's happening in your personal life or your professional life. So don't expect everything to be perfect. That's another great piece of advice. But I think you have to maintain the love. And if you don't have the love, you've either got to find a way to reignite the love for it. And that can be done because sometimes you just lose your way a little bit.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's not the industry or the job or whatever it might be is dead to me. It's just I've lost the spark. It can be rekindled. Absolutely. I've experienced that a number of times. But you must maintain the passion. It's not possible to keep the momentum and the energy unless you have the passion for it. So follow your heart. It's a cliche, but I'm okay with some cliches because it actually really resonates.
Yeah, it does. I mean, Steve Jobs, I've heard him talking opening addresses to Stanford classes, follow your heart. And then
Yeah.
he's got that quote where, if you look in the mirror every day and ask, are you happy with what you're doing? If the answer is no, too many days in a row, then it's time to make a change. One of my mentors was only last week. He said, you can have a bad day, you can have a bad week, but if you're having a bad month, there's something wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
And I
absolutely
thought that
spot
was
on.
quite good because I think, to your point, it's not perfect. Life's not perfect. There will be bad days, but overall, the love of and passion for what you do is the most important thing, 100%. And that's, to me, that's hospitality. As we talking off camera, people.
Absolutely. And I couldn't agree with you more. And on a technical front, don't ever send emails when you're emotional. Because I've been guilty of that a few times early in my career and absolutely had the biggest faux pas you could possibly imagine. So But yes, I mean, it seems so simple, but it's sometimes not that easy to acquire that love and be lucky enough to follow your passion. That's a luxury as well, in some ways.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. That's good advice about the email. It's like probably sleep on it, maybe write it,
Absolutely.
sleep on it, come back to it tomorrow, and maybe it doesn't even need to be sent.
Spot on. I mean, look, as I'm getting older, I'm more comfortable taking a little bit more time to reflect on things, ponder, sleep on things. I say it quite often to my team. They
Yeah.
might propose a certain challenge to me and they have the instant solution. I said, okay, well, that's your solution right now. Let's have a discussion about it. But why don't we both just sleep on this? Tomorrow, have the same discussion. I suspect you might feel a little bit differently about that response. And 9 times out of 10, that's probably the case.
That's good advice. Matt, we're going to talk, I suppose, a little bit about the industry itself now. Is there an emerging trend in the industry? And there could be two trends, one that excites you and the one that makes you anxious, or it may just be positives all the way through.
Well, it's definitely not positives all the way through because life doesn't really go that way.
Yeah.
So there are some concerns, but there's a great sense of opportunity as well. I think in our sector and optimism. So I suppose to deal with the concerns first and foremost, I think the hospitality and tourism sector and the hotel sector more specifically is in a period of change and flux. And some of those changes have been forced upon us to a certain extent. And some of those are perhaps just a natural transition to something else, an evolution, let's call it. But I suppose, what we're seeing, and we're seeing it in our workforce as much as our consumer base, the people that stay in our hotels,
Yeah.
is there is now up to 5 generations working and definitely staying in our hotels. And that's quite unique. And if you look, if I reflect on the changes or the differences in what my expectation is, both as an employee, but also perhaps as a guest in hotels, and I compare that to, say, my son, who's 19,
Yeah.
and what he expects from his employer or what he would expect from a stay in a hotel, they're vastly different. So I don't think that difference has ever been as dramatic as it is right now. So the hotel sector really has some thinking to do on how we overcome those challenges. So we're still in a phase of exploring that to try and fully understand what it is. But I think that's a key driver of my concern around where our industry goes. We need to find a way to be appealing to a broader consumer base and employee base, and one that's broader than it's ever been before. That's no one size fits all solution either on that one. So that's the concern. And look, there are, from a transitory perspective, there are some macro factors out there, political or economic, that impact our business on a day-to-day basis. But I suppose that is always the case. From an optimism perspective, I'm really encouraged by the dynamic, creative thinking that's going on with respect to some of the new brands that I'm seeing out there, particularly the brands that IHG is bringing to the table, as one of the ways to broaden our appeal base, both as an employer and as a branding company.
Yeah.
And that again creates unique opportunities to really tailor experiences to guests and employees. So I suppose they're the same problem. When you view it from two different ways, you can actually, there's a solution in itself there. So I think generally the sector is adapting to change and being a part of the change. Traditionally, you could argue we're not a technology company, so we're not at the cold face of dramatic, fast-paced change. We're branding companies in a hotel space with assets that have extremely large capital investment at the beginning. So to change all of that is not something you can do quickly. But I think there are ways around that. So yeah, it's an exciting time.
That's an interesting point. I've never heard anybody mention, I suppose, the depth of generations that we now cater to, both as guests and a workforce, and that's a good point. Yeah, it means that we need to. I think you used the term earlier. We can't use that one size fits all approach.
Yep.
We need to be conscious when we're creating systems and procedures and everything like that. That the younger generation are all very mobile driven. Of course, they grew up in a digital age, and I heard someone say the other day, and an impatience level. They don't understand delayed gratification. So yes, we're dealing with very different, very very different mindsets. That is an interesting challenge.
Absolutely.
You mentioned technology there. Obviously, technology plays a part. We are not a technology company, but I think it touches every part of life. I mean, you've just got to look at, you can't pick up a newspaper or listen to something without discussions of chat. So, what is one of your biggest lessons regarding technology been in your time within the hotel industry?
I suppose, I mean, and this is not necessarily anyone else's view. It's my personal view that technology is a mechanism. It's an enabler. It's not necessarily the solution for everything.
Mhm.
So it should enable you to do certain things. For example, using artificial intelligence to better farm data should allow you to be better equipped to make good, sound business decisions based on that data. That's a tick in the box. That's wonderful. We've never had more powerful computers than we have today that are helping us do that. So that's great. Now, what we do with that, the technology is not going to tell us that. That's going to be for us to determine. So we need to be conscious of that. So technology suits that purpose. When it comes to experiences in a hotel, technology can be a wonderful enabler. For example, it can remove some labor that's maybe not as efficiently used in delivering a certain service as perhaps technology might be able to perform for us. For example, just a very arbitrary example that everyone's doing is using, QR codes for ordering and room service and what have you. It's been around for a few years now. It works really well. In fact, Brendon, when it first came out, most of us were saying, "Oh, you can't do that in a five-star hotel. The consumer, the guest will never accept that. They want to speak to someone." Actually, no, they don't.
Yeah.
Actually, it's now pretty much. I mean, there might be a portion that still work that way, and that's fine. But we were so nervous about it, saying, "Oh, you can't put a QR code in a five-star hotel room." Well, you absolutely can, and generally, it's been very well received. So that creates a great opportunity to use a little bit of technology, very basic technology, to actually provide perhaps a simpler service for someone
Yeah.
and remove a bit of labor. So they're just two very basic examples of what it can do for you. Some can enable good business decisions, and some can enable some efficiency and effectiveness work. And we've got lots of other examples of that we're doing at the moment, particularly when it comes to things like revenue management systems.
Mm.
In the past, we would have a team of people trawling through data, doing very menial jobs to understand where the rate opportunity was. Well, now we use artificial intelligence with our new N2 pricing strategy to trawl for all that data. And then we use really highly qualified senior executives to make the business decisions and recommendations for the hotels.
Yeah.
Much better service.
Yeah, I'm in agreeing with you. Technology is certainly not the answer to every problem, and certainly in our industry, it is an enabler.
Yeah.
And your point about room service is a good one. And I won't mention the property because I don't think it's happened yet. But there's a very, luxury property that are looking to introduce QR codes. And to your point, it's like, wow. But their argument is that, you probably get 5 or 6 people place an order at 7 p.m. At the moment, one or two of them might actually get a busy signal because room service can't cope with 5 phone calls at once. But a QR code can certainly handle 5 orders simultaneously.
Absolutely.
What they're going to do is use the team that were delivering room service
Yeah.
to actually enhance the in-room dining experience. So it's going to be proper trolley, cloth, cutlery, candles. It'll be a better experience at the end of the day because they can free the team up to do that. So I think that's
Yeah.
the guest benefits because they get quick, convenient ordering, and then they get the experience at the end of the day because you've
Mm.
utilized that team to do something that technology can't do and deliver a great experience. So
Yeah.
I think
I love that.
I like that. I always like to ask, if we look 10 years ahead, what do you think the industry might look like? Is there going to be dramatic change? And there are the things now that we should be doing to sort of preempt that. I mean, sustainability is a big one. I got asked to present at No Vacancy and I started doing some research, and I obviously start to realize that 2030, which is when we made all these commitments, all countries, at the Paris Accord, we thought that was a long way away. Well, it's 2025 around the corner and we've still got a long way to go. And I think as hotels, obviously we need to play a part in that. What else do you think is going to shape our industry in the next 10 years?
There's a few things: talent and people, for the first thing. So I'll get to sustainability last, but I suppose from an attraction and retention of talent, I mentioned earlier, I am a bit concerned about it, around how we attract great talent and how we retain them and develop them as great leaders in the industry. So we need to think a little bit differently around that, how we position hotel as an industry of choice, not an industry I've either been forced into or fallen into because I'm waiting to do something else. So we need to make it fun again. We need to make it aspirational again. And I know 30 years ago, 25, 30 years ago, when I first finished school and was emerging into the real world, it was known as a really appealing sector. And somehow we lost our way a little bit. And I don't know why that was, really. But I don't have a crystal ball on it other than to say for us at IHG, and I know my peers at all the other big companies are all thinking quite deeply around how we position the industry and how we attract the talent and develop them. And I'm even happy to share them around some of the other competitors. It doesn't really matter. We want them to stay in the hotel sector, and it's their choice whereabouts they work in that sector. But I think we want to, if we attract wonderful talent, then that'll have knock-on effect to everything else within our business. So I'm nervous around that, but I do think the way we're thinking about it right now will result in some really good outcomes. But it does create a little bit of a different thought pattern because of what I said earlier around the generational differences and how many generations are even working in our sector now. So super important there, but I do think we'll find a way through that, and it'll encompass many, many things. Diversity in role, I think, is just one of the real simple ones, where a younger generation could argue to you that they want diversity and change in what they're doing on a daily and weekly basis, whereas someone like my generation was trained to master something, move on to the next task, master that, move on to the next one. Well, I like the idea of diversity and cross-pollination, and you can be in a multi-purpose role. We generally didn't think about that, but now the way we think around some of the middle management roles in our hotels is you can actually be responsible for multiple functions, not necessarily just one, as long as you have a good layer of team underneath you. And that way you broaden your horizon and your knowledge and skill base. So I like what I'm seeing in that space. It also then addresses our issues with respect to challenges with profitability of hotels and manning and what have you, because you've actually got more diversity there and a broader skill base. So I love those ideas. So I think we'll be operating our hotels very differently. It'll be a function of we just had to do that, and also it's what was right to keep the sector moving along. Sustainability, I mean, you touched on it. Oh, it's crucial. It's only becoming more and more important. And the challenges we're facing down here in the Australasia Pacific region is that largely, although we're seeing new hotels being developed, and they generally have in place the mechanisms to be quite responsible, the overwhelming majority of our estate has been here for some time before these measures came into place. So retrofitting efficiency measures and sustainability measures into what could be 20, 30, 40, 50-year-old assets is actually incredibly challenging, and a significant capital requirement and responsibility for our owners of our real estate. And they need to balance that with the returns as well. And then when you layer on top inflationary pressures and just the general demands on how you deliver projects, the cost pressure, it's a really, really hard dynamic at the moment. So I feel for our business partners and our owners of our real estate, because they want to come on the journey with the big brands like ourselves who have a really strong environmental platform, but it's very, very expensive. So we just need to work with them on that.
That's a very good point regarding a lot of the older stock. It's very difficult, isn't it? Matt, as we get ready to wrap up, I always like to ask, what piece of advice would you give somebody who's contemplating or starting their career in hospitality?
Well, they could give me a call, and we'd love to give them. We'd love to share some advice with them and put them in a hotel for a day and see how they experience it. But outside of that, I think be bold, give it a go. Start at the bottom, because at the bottom is where you learn the love for it, because that's the cold face with the guest. And if putting a smile on a guest's face doesn't put a smile on yours, then it's the wrong industry for you. So don't come into it. But if it does, and it triggers that something in you that becomes a special occasion, you can have that on a daily basis. And I love that. I love going up to our hotels and hearing the stories from, the guest facing staff around what they've done for someone. When you hear some of the lengths they go to make someone feel special, it's quite unique. Like I had an example, and I'll tell you it because it's really special. If this doesn't tweak your heartstrings, then don't join hotels. But at the Intercontinental Sydney here, the team reported to me, so they know me, and I asked them for a favour, and I never ask for favours. I said, look, my parents, they're having I think it was their 60th wedding anniversary.
Wow.
Okay, so they've been married a long time, and look, they had 7 kids, of which I'm one, and they gave us everything, but the result was they didn't have much left at the end apart from their kids and their grandkids. So they don't have a lot of money, but that doesn't stop them. They don't feel anything other than love for that and pride from that. But I wanted to make them feel special. So I said, look, why don't we book them in at the Intercontinental here in Sydney for a night? And then with my other siblings, we'll pay for that. And then we'll send them for dinner down at the Opera House. So I caught up Jenny Brown, the general manager there, and I said, look, I don't like for favours, but please, can you just make them feel a little bit special? And I left it at that. Anyway, I spoke to my father after the occasion, and he was almost in tears, saying, I walked into this room, and it was a wonderful room, and on it was balloons and cake saying happy wedding anniversary. And he said, I've never felt this way in my life. They've never done anything for themselves. They've done everything for their family. And to go there and be made to feel special, he couldn't describe the joy it brought him. So we can do that on a daily basis with lots of people. We don't know what's going on in their lives. And if we know, I suspect for most of us, either you yourself, Brendon, or myself, or people that are listening to this, there's all sorts of stuff going on in everyone's lives. So when they come into a hotel, you don't know what's going through their mind, but you can make them forget that really, really quickly by making a momentous, memorable occasion like that. So if that tweaks your interest, then hotels are for you.
Yeah, I love the point you made. If you don't get joy out of putting a smile on a guest's face, then it's not the industry for you, because that is it. Everybody that I know that's got a passion for the industry just loves that aspect. It's not a service mentality. It is, but it's more that you like to see great experiences, memorable experiences for guests. And you're quite right. You have no idea. And it can often be something very little. It was actually someone, I just relate this story. It was actually at the Oracle event the other day. Is a very senior executive from Oracle, travels a lot. And she was at a hotel in the UK, and the receptionist asked her a question. It was a very simple question about, like, how do you look after your hair or something, when you're traveling in and out of planes so often. She mentioned something, I used this, and she came back to a room later, and they'd literally bought in a little bottle of it, and the receptionist had handwritten a card, enjoy your stay. And she said, to me, that meant so much more than the wine and cheese platters, which sort of every guest gets. It's part of the SOP. This was just a little thing that was above and beyond, that showed genuine hospitality and the desire to care for someone.
Love that story. We have a brand. The Kimpton brand is very big on that. I mean, all of our brands need to do it, but they're very big on that. But that's where you need the people, because the people have to be a part of that. They are that, actually. So if you have the staff that love doing that and read those little signs, I mean, that one's wonderful about an executive that travels and needs to look after her hair. It seems so simple, but it's just brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is. And I love the point that you would quite welcome to, take on somebody who's considering the industry and pop them into a hotel for a day, because I think unless you've experienced it, then that's a wonderful thing. No, I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Matt, I've had a wonderful time chatting to you today. Thank you so much.
Brendon, I've enjoyed it. Appreciate it. Take care.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks. Bye-bye.